Hello, everyone. Have you ever felt like you're being watched when you're all alone in the woods? Imagine going on a camping trip to escape the world, only to find yourself trapped in your worst nightmare. In these two spine-chilling stories, one man finds himself stalked by an unseen presence, sending cryptic messages, while a group of friends faces the terror of a mysterious scream that leads them running for their lives. What happens when silence turns deadly? What would you do if you realized someone or something was following you? Stay tuned as we dive into these true horror tales, where every shadow hides a terrifying secret. Are you ready to face the unknown?
It was early in the morning when I pulled up to Grand Ridge, the mist clinging to the pines like a ghostly veil. The world was still, untouched by the bustling crowds of the city, and that's exactly what I needed: a quiet place to escape. The pandemic had everyone stuck at home, but not me. I was different. I wasn't going to let the world's chaos keep me locked inside. So, I packed up my truck with camping gear, and after a few hours of driving, I found myself in a place that promised peace: the remote, desolate woods of Olympic National Park. I wasn't looking for company, just solitude. The air was crisp, and the snow crunched under my boots as I walked along the narrow trail. There wasn't a soul in sight, just the occasional rustle of the trees, the sound of the wind cutting through the branches, and the distant call of birds. The silence was almost oppressive, but it was the kind of silence I needed. After a while, I reached my destination, a small creek running through the forest. It was peaceful, the water trickling over rocks, unbothered by the chaos of the world. I set up camp by the creek, my hands trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of everything that had been going on in my life. The isolation felt good. I was finally getting away from the endless threats and harassment that had been stalking me for months. But even in this secluded paradise, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong.
As I built a fire and cooked my dinner, I tried to quiet my mind. I cracked open a book, but my thoughts kept drifting to the past: the job I lost, the people I'd let down, the harassing messages that had plagued me for months. I tried to push it all away, but it lingered. Just as I began to lose myself in my book, my phone buzzed. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just a message from my family, but when I checked, my heart skipped a beat. It was a number I didn't recognize. "How's the camping going, buddy?" the message read. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. Then came another one. "It's beautiful out here," it said. The third was the most unsettling. "I see why you came up here." My stomach twisted into knots. How did they know where I was? How did they know I was camping? My mind raced. Could this be a prank? Or was it someone who had been stalking me for months, still bent on tormenting me? I stood up, my heart pounding, and looked around the darkening woods. There was nobody in sight. Still, I felt eyes on me, like someone was watching, waiting. I pulled my jacket tighter around me and went to my bag to grab my handgun. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, but the feeling in my gut told me that I wasn't. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The fire flickered, casting long shadows in the darkening forest. I wasn't sure what was worse, the fear of being followed or the thought that I was just paranoid. Then, the footsteps came. I froze. They crunched loudly in the snow, getting closer. My pulse thundered in my ears. Someone was out there, in the woods with me. The footsteps came closer, and then stopped, right outside my tent. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know if I was hearing things or if someone was really there, but the silence that followed was deafening. I sat motionless, staring at my phone, waiting for the next text, the next clue that would either confirm my worst fears or shatter my sense of safety forever. The phone buzzed again. "Have a good night's sleep." The message sent ice through my veins. I knew I had to act, but my hands were shaking as I unzipped the tent. I was going to confront whoever was out there, whoever was playing this sick game with me. I stepped out of the tent into the biting cold, the dark woods swallowing up the firelight. I gripped my gun tightly, preparing for whatever was out there. Something in my gut told me I wasn't alone, and I was about to find out how far this nightmare would go. As I stepped further into the dark, I felt it, the unmistakable sense that I was being hunted. I stood there, heart racing, as the cold air bit at my skin. The shadows of the trees seemed to close in around me, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The woods were still, too still, and the silence weighed heavy on my chest. My hand gripped the gun tighter, my knuckles white against the cold steel. Every rustle in the wind, every creak of the trees, made my senses flare with terror. Then, it happened. A flash of light. It was quick, almost too fast for my brain to process. A brief, blinding flash like a camera's burst illuminated the ground around me. I looked towards the source, my breath catching in my throat. Whoever was out there was no longer hiding in the dark. They were close, too close. My mind raced. Was it a trick? A reflection from the fire? Or was it someone deliberately revealing themselves? I couldn't trust my senses, not now. The paranoia was sinking deeper, gnawing at me. My phone buzzed again, a harsh reminder of how wrong everything felt. Another picture. This one was different. The photo wasn't of me. It was a picture of my tent, taken from just beyond the trees. The text that followed made my stomach drop. Sleep well. I'll be here when you wake up. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The message wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. Whoever was out there, they knew exactly where I was. They were watching me, waiting for me to make a move. The footsteps started again, this time slower, more deliberate. They were circling me. My heart pounded as I made my decision. It wasn't a prank, it was real, and I had to face it head on. I stepped toward the noise, gun raised, but my hands shook with dread. My pulse hammered in my ears as I stepped further into the darkness. The faint crunch of my boots on the snow, the only sound that broke the oppressive silence. The footsteps had stopped, but I knew they were still out there, watching, waiting for me to make the next move. My fingers tightened around the gun, the cold metal sending a chill up my spine. The trees seemed to stretch on endlessly, their twisted branches like claws trying to reach out and grab me. I scanned the shadows, my eyes darting to every flicker of movement, every rustle in the branches. The fear gnawing at my insides was almost suffocating, but I refused to let it control me. I had to act. Then, I heard it again, footsteps. But this time, they were closer, right behind me. My breath caught in my throat, and I spun around, gun raised. My eyes searched the dark, but there was nothing there. Only the quiet rustle of the trees and the haunting silence of the woods. My heart was pounding so loudly now, it felt like the entire forest could hear it. I took a step back, my eyes still scanning every inch of the woods. The cold was biting, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins kept me going. Then, the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter snapped through the silence. I froze. Another flash of light illuminated the trees this time, closer than ever. I turned to face it, my body trembling, but ready. I wasn't going to let this person intimidate me any longer. "Who's out there?" I called, my voice but defiant. No answer. Just silence. Then, without warning, the footsteps rushed towards me, and I fired 2 shots into the air, the crack of gunfire echoing through the trees. The sound of running footsteps followed, quickly fading into the distance. I stood there for a moment, breathless, my heart still racing. The silence returned, but this time, it wasn't as heavy. I had scared them off for now. But I knew deep down, the fear wouldn't be so easy to shake. The echoes of my gunshots hung in the air, sharp and biting, dissipating into the vast emptiness of the woods. For a moment, everything felt still, almost unnaturally so. The adrenaline that had surged through my veins now began to fade, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of emptiness. My breathing slowed, but my heart continued to pound in my chest like a drumbeat, thrumming with the aftershock of fear. I stood there in the cold, staring into the darkness where the footsteps had once been. The night seemed to swallow the sound of the world. No more crunching snow, no more whispers in the wind, just silence. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there, just beyond the reach of the firelight. I slowly backed toward my tent, my eyes never leaving the shadows. Every step felt like it could be my last. Was it over? Or was I being lulled into a false sense of security? When I reached my tent, I zipped the flap closed and crawled inside. I fumbled with my phone, my hands still shaking from the encounter. No new messages, no photos. But the dread lingered, creeping into my thoughts like a slow poison. My mind kept flashing back to the photo me tent, taken from the woods. Who had been stalking me knew too much. I tried to convince myself it was over, that the threat had been scared off. But as the cold air seeped through the thin fabric of my tent, I couldn't shake the unsettling sense of being watched. I lay there, wide awake, every creak of the trees making my heart race. The night stretched on, and despite my exhaustion, sleep would not come. And somewhere, out in the dark woods, I knew the watcher was still there waiting, just beyond the veil of the night. The hours dragged on, but sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, the sound of footsteps would echo in my mind, replaying over and over. My body ached with exhaustion, yet my mind wouldn't let me rest. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the wind made my heart lurch. My hand never strayed far from the gun, still tightly gripped, as if it could somehow ward off whatever lingered in the dark. Dawn slowly crept over the forest, a pale gray light seeping through the trees, but it did little to ease the tension in my chest. The quiet was oppressive. The fire outside had burned low, its dying embers glowing faintly against the creeping chill of morning. The sun was barely up, and yet I already felt the heavy weight of the night's events. I didn't want to leave the safety of the tent, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. The air outside felt colder than it should have been, a cold that seeped deep into your bones. I unzipped the flap of my tent cautiously, eyes scanning the surrounding woods for any sign of movement. The woods were eerily silent, but I didn't trust it. The feeling of being watched hadn't gone away. I stepped out into the clearing, my boots crunching softly on the snow as I surveyed the area. Nothing. No footprints in the fresh snow, no sign of anyone. But then I saw it, something that sent a chill straight to my core. Just beyond the trees, where the darkness still clung stubbornly, a single flash of light blinked in the distance. A camera flash. It was subtle. A brief, fleeting moment, but enough to send the cold wave of panic crashing over me once again. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't safe. The flash of light faded as quickly as it had appeared, but the impact was immediate. My breath caught in my throat, a cold shiver running down my spine. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't the sun breaking through the trees. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, was out there, watching me. I froze. My heart raced, my pulse quickening as my eyes darted around the clearing, searching for movement. Any sign of the presence I knew was lurking just beyond the trees. But the forest was silent, too silent. The only sound was the faint breeze rustling through the branches. The only movement sway of the trees in the wind. I felt the weight of the gun in my hand, the cold metal comforting in a way. But it wasn't enough. My mind raced through possibilities. Was it the same person who had been texting me, stalking me for days? Was it a twisted prank, or something more sinister? The question lingered in my mind like a dark cloud. How did they know I was here? I couldn't just stand there, paralyzed by fear. I had to act. With a deep breath, I pushed the anxiety down as best I could and started walking slowly toward the edge of the clearing. My eyes never left the trees, scanning every shadow, every rustle of the underbrush. Every part of me screamed to run, to get back in the tent, to lock myself away from whatever nightmare was unfolding. But I couldn't. I wasn't going to cower any longer. As I reached the tree line, a sudden sound pierced the stillness, a low, guttural growl that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. It wasn't human, and it wasn't animal. I whipped around, but there was nothing. Nothing but the silence that swallowed the world whole. The growl echoed in my ears, vibrating through my chest, but it was gone as quickly as it had come. I spun around, eyes darting through the shadows of the trees. My pulse was racing, my body trembling with a mix of fear and adrenaline. The gun in my hand felt heavier now, its presence almost comforting, but the terror gnawing at me made it feel useless. I took a cautious step forward, then another, my boots crunching loudly in the snow. My breath came out in short, frantic bursts, the cold air stinging my lungs. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was circling me, that I was being hunted by something I couldn't see. The woods had grown darker again, the faint light of dawn quickly swallowed by the dense canopy of trees above. Then, I heard a soft rustle, followed by a quick snap of a twig. It was close. Too close. I turned, raising the gun instinctively, but there was nothing there. The forest was as still as death. A voice, soft but clear, pierced the silence. "Enjoy your solitude." My blood ran cold. That was the last straw. I didn't hesitate. With trembling hands, I turned and ran, charging through the trees, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might give out. I didn't stop. Not until I was back in my truck, driving away, fleeing the woods that had become my worst nightmare. I drove through the winding roads, my hands gripped tightly on the wheel, heart still racing. The woods, now a distant memory, felt like a nightmare that hadn't quite ended. The flash of light, the growl, the voice, they all haunted me, chasing me through the rearview mirror. But as I drove further, the feeling of being followed faded. I wasn't sure if it was the fear trickling away, or if I had truly escaped whatever had stalked me in the woods. Either way, I knew one thing for sure. I would never return to those woods. Never again. The air was sharp with the scent of pine, as Ryan Davis and his friends, Mark, Ben, and Jason, made their way deeper into the woods. They'd driven for hours to escape the city, to reconnect and recharge after a long year. The trees towered over them, their shadows stretching like long fingers into the fading light. The night was settling in, and with it, an eerie quiet that made Ryan's skin crawl. The forest seemed to be holding its breath. They set up camp near a small clearing by a stream, far from the noise of civilization. The last rays of daylight dipped behind the hills, casting the woods in an unsettling gloom. Despite the cold that began to creep in, the warmth of the fire flickered brightly, and for a moment, everything felt right. They cracked open beers, roasted marshmallows, and laughed, the sound of their voices breaking through the stillness. But something lingered in the Iran unshakable tension, a feeling that they weren't alone. It started with a sound, faint at first like the rustling of leaves, or maybe a distant animal. But then, it came again, louder this time, clearer, a scream. The kind of scream that sent a chill crawling up Ryan's spine. It sounded like a woman. "Probably a fox or something," Ben said, trying to brush it off, though his voice wavered slightly. But the scream came again. This time, it was closer, louder, and unmistakably human. The hairs on the back of Ryan's neck stood on end as he exchanged uneasy glances with the others. His heart began to race. A strange unease settled over them. The air seemed to grow thicker, colder, as if the woods themselves were holding a secret. The trees whispered in the wind, and in the silence that followed the scream, the forest seemed to close in on them. "What was that?" Jason whispered, his eyes wide. Before Ryan could answer, another scream pierced the night, this one so close it felt like it was right outside their tent. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay still. What was happening? The air seemed to freeze around them. The fire crackled weakly, the orange flames flickering, casting long, eerie shadows across the campsite. The second scream echoed through the trees, raw and desperate, sending a wave of panic through Ryan's chest. He stood frozen, heart hammering in his ears. That wasn't a fox. That wasn't anything natural. Ben's voice broke through the tension. "It's gotta be a prank, right? Maybe someone else camping out here." But even as he spoke, Ryan could tell they didn't believe it. The fear was palpable, hanging thick in the air like the damp chill that was rapidly settling in. Another scream, louder this time. It was unmistakable human. And this one was followed by something even more unsettling. Footsteps. The sound of quick, deliberate steps in the snow, getting closer. They were circling the camp. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. He grabbed the nearest flashlight, but the beam trembled in his hand, as if it too was afraid of what lurked just beyond the trees. The footsteps stopped. Dead silence. Then, the tent shook. Ryan jumped, his heart leaping into his throat. Someone or something was right outside. "Who's there?" he called, voice shaking. His words were swallowed by the oppressive darkness, but there was no reply. only the unsettling sound of more footsteps moving away into the night. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as the footsteps grew faint, but the terror hadn't left him. The air felt thick, suffocating, and the flickering light from the campfire seemed too fragile against the overwhelming darkness. He held his breath, listening intently, but all he could hear was the rush of his own blood and the eerie quiet of the forest. Then, suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled with the sound of heavy footsteps, this time fast and deliberate. The chill in the air turned to ice as Ryan's stomach dropped. This was no prank. No animal. Something or someone was stalking them. "Stay quiet," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible as he motioned for the others to stay still. His mind raced, trying to process what was happening. It was like they were being hunted. Without warning, the tent shook again, harder this time, as if something had slammed into it. The fabric flapped violently in the wind, and Ryan could hear the panic in Mark's voice. "Open the door, let's go," Mark shouted. Ryan didn't hesitate. They all scrambled to unzip the tent and burst out into the frigid night. Their flashlights sliced through the darkness, but the woods swallowed the light as they ran, fear driving them faster, away from whatever was following. The ground felt endless, and each heartbeat was a reminder of the terror closing in. The cold air burned in Ryan's lungs as he ran, each step heavier than the last. His legs screamed in protest, but there was no stopping. He could hear his friends behind him, panting, stumbling through the snow, their flashlights bouncing wildly in the night. But Ryan didn't dare turn back. Every instinct told him to keep moving, faster. The forest seemed endless, its towering trees like dark sentinels watching them as they fled. The light from their flashlights barely reached beyond the nearest branches, and every snap of a twig sent a shock through Ryan's body, making him jump in fear. He could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind them, too close, too fast. Whoever or whatever was following them wasn't struggling. It was chasing them, and it was gaining ground. "Keep running," Jason's voice cracked, terror lacing his words. Ryan's mind raced as he pushed through the fear. They had to reach the cabin. They were close, he was sure of it. But the sound of footsteps continued to grow louder, closer, like something moving just beyond their reach, always just a few steps away. The ground beneath them seemed to shift with every passing moment, and Ryan could feel the weight of the pursuit closing in. But when he looked over his shoulder, there was nothing, just the oppressive blackness of the woods swallowing them whole. Suddenly, a scream echoed behind them, followed by a crash. Something had fallen, but was it the thing chasing them? The crash behind them sent a jolt of panic through Ryan's spine. His mind raced as he glanced over his shoulder, but all he saw was darkness, absolute darkness, thick and suffocating. There was no sign of whatever had fallen, no flash of light, just the deep, empty blackness of the forest. The scream that followed had a primal, gut-wrenching edge to it, a sound so unnatural that it made Ryan's blood run cold. "Go! Go!" Ben yelled, his voice laced with desperation. "We're almost there." Ryan didn't need any more encouragement. They pushed forward, breathless and frantic, the sound of their feet crunching on the snow drowned out by the blood rushing in his ears. Every part of him screamed to stop, to look back, but he forced himself to focus on the path ahead. The cabin was close, just beyond the next set of trees. He could hear Mark and Jason behind him, but the crash, that scream, the feeling that something was right on their heels wouldn't leave him. They rounded the final bend, the outline of the cabin barely visible through the trees. Just as Ryan reached out for the door, a deafening thud shook the ground beneath them. Then, silence. The kind of silence that presses in on you, that suffocates. Ryan's hand froze inches from the door handle. Someone was still out there, watching. And whatever it wasn't finished with them yet. Ryan's hand trembled as it hovered above the cabin door handle, every instinct screaming at him to run, to hide, to do anything but stay exposed. The thud from behind them still echoed in his mind, an ominous reminder that whatever was chasing them hadn't given up. The woods around them had gone eerily quiet, almost too quiet. The wind that had once rustled the branches now stood still, leaving only the heavy, suffocating silence. "Ryan, open the door," Mark's voice cracked, his breath quick and shallow. They were almost there, but Ryan knew that if they didn't get inside soon, they might not make it. With a final burst of strength, Ryan turned the handle and threw the door open. The familiar smell of old wood and pine hit him, but there was no time to savor it. They rushed inside, slamming the door behind them. The sound of their frantic breathing filled the small cabin, the weight of the outside world pressing against the walls. Ryan rushed to lock the door, his hands shaking. But as he turned the key, he heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, just outside the cabin. They were trapped. The thing that had been stalking them was now here, just beyond the door, waiting. With a final, deafening thud, something slammed against the cabin, shaking it to its core. The woods were no longer silent. Something was inside. The door creaked as the force outside slammed against it again. Ryan's heart raced, each breath shallow and fast. He glanced at his friends, panic reflected in their wide eyes. They were trapped. With a final desperate push, Ryan grabbed the old wooden chair beside the door, wedging it under the handle. The door groaned under the pressure, but held. For now, the silence stretched, unbearable, broken only by the distant, unholy screech from the woods. They sat, frozen in the darkness, knowing that whatever was out there wasn't finished. The hunt had only just begun. So, what would you do if you were in one of these situations? Have you ever felt like someone or something was watching you when you were alone? Or maybe you've experienced a chilling moment that you can't explain. I'd love to hear your stories. Drop them in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed these spine-tingling tales, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more terrifying stories. And remember, sometimes the scariest things are the ones that could happen to you. See you next time.